Good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Christ the King parishioners, our school community, and all those who are listening to us on this interview series. I'm extremely happy to present to you our school principal, Mr. Joe Silvera. I am very grateful for his leadership, for his hard work. I'm also happy Mr. Joe Reid, the chair of the school finance committee, is going to interview Mr. Joe. If any of you have questions, feel free to send it on Facebook, and Joe Reid will be following your questions. Once again, thank you, and I hand this over to Mr. Silvera and Joe Reid.
Well, good evening and welcome to our CTK community. I want to thank Father Paulson for his solidarity and leadership and counsel, for curating the questions this evening. And in addition to that, it's a real pleasure to have Joe Reid interviewing me on behalf of the community this evening. Joe had a long-standing career in taxation with Chevron and is now retired. He and his beautiful wife, Denise, have 3 children who have attended Catholic schools in our diocese. Joe has been on countless boards. In fact, he's on the board of my alma mater, Salesian High School in Richmond. His work with sustaining schools is unparalleled, and his wonderful mind is only eclipsed by his big heart. So Joe, I'm going to defer to you now, and you can tee us up and certainly ask any questions you would like.
Well, Joe, first of all, thank you very much for the very nice introduction. It's a pleasure to work with you and with Father Paulson and the entire Christ the King community. As Father mentioned, I'll be taking live questions along with the pre-scripted questions that many of you have already seen. Feel free to give us your questions. Hopefully within the hour we can get to many of them. We apologize in advance if we don't get to all of your questions. So Joe, let me start. Obviously the COVID virus has resulted in an unprecedented time here at Christ the King in California, in the US and the world. There's no game plan that was written for schools to follow to determine what was best for our students, for the faculty, and for our extended community here at Christ the King. We have community members that are at risk. We have people with compromised immune systems. We have older people who live at great risk for the COVID virus. Joe, tonight we're going to talk about the school plans for a tentative reopening in January. You've announced your plans. You developed, along with your leadership team, what we refer to as the hybrid plan with 2 cohorts, red and gold, that all the parents have seen. You've seen the 14-page document around the cohort. Okay, Joe, you and your faculty are very pleased with the distance learning program that's taken place since last March. You've acknowledged, obviously, that in-person learning is best for the students. And if not for the COVID virus, all of our students would be in class right now. You published the survey results from your faculty and school families, which document that the majority of the faculty and families are opposed to returning to the classroom for in-class learning at this time. Though some neighboring Catholic schools have decided to return to class using a hybrid plan that looks a whole lot like the one that Christ the King developed and published. Let me start with the big question that everybody is asking. Why has Christ the King chosen to wait until January to reopen? What's your rationale for waiting until January, which, as we've spoken, there are 26 more in-classroom education days between now and Christmas vacation. So can you give us some details around your rationale for your decision to reopen in January?
Certainly, and I think a lot of those insights will come up organically as we go through the queue of questions. But presently, we all know that the county has entered into an orange tier, which depicts lower infection rates. But really, this is only one facet of many components that has informed our decision to reopen. Other factors that you alluded to included the comfortability of our teachers, our faculty and staff, and our parents. Faculty and staff 3 weeks ago above the Pareto curve at 82% were reticent to return in the red at that time. The feasibility of really implementing county health and safety standards requires intentionality and a lot of heavy lifting, and we've shown that. Certainly, as I've written in the past, the importance of routine and maximizing student learning time is a component too. And then there's that ever-present challenge of delivering instruction online while simultaneously preparing the campus for students to return, just to name a few. Further, the decision about when to return has been made site by site in consultation with the diocese, not mandatively so. Father Paulson is our pastor. Canonically, he has the final call. I am very close to him, not only as a leader, but as a confidant. We have similar philosophies, and we're very measured and intentional in our responses. Some schools have chosen to reopen, but most recently there's been a paradigm shift for more limited kind of unpacking, if you will, capacity. And again, each school has its own unique resources and needs. Truly, every situation is different. What works for one school may not necessarily work for another. And further, in addition to all that's been stated thus far, the logistics of reopening school following the county guidelines are very complex. The target is very fluid. Again, extensive planning to implement effectively, and particularly with large numbers of students. We have upwards to a ceiling of 36 students per class with a ceiling of 324. There's a backfire to excellence. When we have 2 reading specialists and all the bells and whistles, and in a normalized sense, we're triangulating our groups with transmigration to other rooms. When you dig into the present edicts and procedures, we have to be aware that demographically, master schedule-wise, there's a lot of pieces that sort of encumber where we need to be, thus the time. Teachers are currently working more than full-time. So are our parents, and I've cited that before, for quality distance learning. Right now, as an example, we've shifted our conferences this year, wisely so, to November. So we're preparing for conferences. We're ending a trimester. So although that's a conceived break, we're closing strong. You need time to shift on any level. There's certainly the procedures, the policies, preparing classrooms. We're prepared for that, but you also have to adjust curriculum and materials. We have to ensure that our plans that are in place are safe for our students and staff to return back to campus. And while distance learning certainly is not ideal, students presently are in a routine where our distance learning plan is stealth, strong, and productive. From a social emotional standpoint, we'll talk later, certainly long term, this isn't the perfect plan. And we certainly have a lot of goals in set to that as well. And really, there's limited time, as you alluded to, Joe, until Christmas. I mean, if you start to unpack and there's Thanksgiving break and you're back for a short time and then an elongated break for Christmas, we were one of the first schools to produce the month of January and then the date. And if you look proximally, and even in the state with local districts, private schools and beyond, lots of folks have shifted out to that January date. And we're going to speak more why January 13th in a moment. And really, it's just a natural point in the year to reset and establish our routines. The beginning of the year is like a plane lifting. Lots of inertia in a normalized sense, where we're orienting and planning. And the end of the year in May is like a plane landing. So to do that right requires time, and it requires not only intentionality, but the planning. And so I believe that January is the best break. I just pray that at that time we're in a similar status to push go.
Okay, so in a few minutes, we're going to start to talk about the safety protocols and some of the safety equipment that's necessary for Christ the King School to reopen. Tell me, as you were making your decision, and you can talk about some of the people that you consulted with before you reached your decision, why January 13th?
That's a great question. Well, again, we wanted to allow time after Christmas break to help our students and teachers transition back. That week, by the way, is an exhausting week, and we all forget about that because it's reorienting into routines, just like the beginning of the year. And that would be back to in-person learning. You know, the analogy I would use is you just don't start a tractor on the ranch. Here I am, 5th generation rancher. You know, we're going from literally March 17th and then returning to in-person, thus the natural break. Further, to do this right, we would have to orient our students and our parents to, maybe shifting from an interview such as this to a Zoom webinar for our parents, for our students with the synchronous and asynchronous aspects, making for sure that they know our protocols, our policies and procedures. The 13th is midweek. On the 15th, we have a diocesan in-service day. We also have Martin Luther King weekend, which gives the teachers the opportunity to put finishing touches and so forth. And again, not starting with a hard stop, offering time for acclimation, preparation, orientation, with the ideal being to, God willing, close the year in a strong way.
I want to interject right here. There has been a couple of comments. One of your parents has written, Christ the King has been doing an outstanding job. Thank you for making all the touch decisions to keep our kids safe. Staying distance is the only way to give kids routine stability during this unstable time. Will there be an option to stay this way over the entire school year, even if CTK opens? And I also want to bring another comment so that you can respond to that. We realize that teachers are putting in so much time and effort into distance learning and soon in-person learning. What can we as parents do to support teachers and staff as they are working hard to teach and care for kids? Back to you.
Joe, do you want to respond to that question
Yes.
now?
Wow. Humbly we pray. Thank you. I will say this. I don't want to have a dichotomy of separation here. I want to thank you for those beautiful sentiments, but I want you to know this. The faculty and staff we have is incredible. This education is unparalleled. There's a lot of legacy, but I want to thank our parents too. Because as I said at the first back tonight, school night talk, God is in the middle. We have our parent guardians who are leading not by word but by example. Our beloved faculty and staff with our beloved parents and our cherished students. That really is the inspiration for what we do. So you are already helping our teachers by your wonderful example, by 60 to 80 of you in a normalized sense coming to morning prayer. Well over 100 of you coming to Mass, supporting our school, being respectful to me when you email me or reach out. That's what we ask. I love this community.
Very important to show your appreciation for basically your essential workers. It's critical in the learning system that there's clearly respect and appreciation for your hardworking staff. Along those lines, Joe, we've talked about some of the rehiring you have to do in preparation for reopening the school. There is Club, our extended care program, but also our two nursing assistants who are going to play critical roles in our safety protocol and keeping our students and our faculty safe. That leads me to the next question. What steps as Christ the King School do you need to take to prepare for reopening in January, along with some of the hiring? What other steps do you have to take that maybe our parents aren't aware of all the work that goes on behind the scenes? So what steps are you taking to get ready for January?
Well, many steps, and certainly nothing is done unilaterally or in a silo. In fact, as a leader, I'm a doer and a thinker, and I'm far better when everyone's here on site. But to answer your question succinctly, I personally and Father Paulson and many others have consulted with medical experts. We do have a health task force. I met with them last weekend. We'll be meeting with them this weekend. I've met individually, with Sergio Acuyo and many others for their great minds and great experience.
You might have mentioned that Sergio actually is a health official for the county of Contra Costa. So he's right in the front line
Yes.
of developing policy for the county.
You better believe it. Sergio is the county chair for our county hospital. He holds a background with 2 medical degrees. He also is linked to the county-wide task force teams. We have Eileen Brinker, who is a wonderful example as well of a health expert. Both she and Sergio are on the front lines, and she's presently at UCSF, forgive me. And then Layla McCool, who works with our diocese from an auditing perspective with our health documentation. Wonderful parent, all 3 of them are. And I've met with Sergio and Eileen individually, and now we're meeting more collectively. But I want to dig into this question. We have a senior leadership team, Father Paulson, myself, Katie Thornberry, assistant principal, and Jean Busey as the 4th member of the senior leadership team as an assistant principal too. There are certainly diocesan officials that I've conferred with. I mentioned earlier that Father Paulson is a great leader, a great confidant, and a morally principled man who I reach out to privately and in confidence. We have a school advisory council that Sue Weiler-Doak leads, where unlike most schools that meet quarterly, we meet monthly. The school now has bylaws. What we've done in the last 2.5 years, and perhaps that's another interview, as far as blossoming and growth, has been unparalleled. I'm proud of that. Finance committee, we have double reciprocity when we're submitting budgets. Joe, you are our finance chair on the school side. Greg Thornberry on the parish side, yet we have internal controls and reciprocity with Dick Bertrand and others. So there's a lot of counsel when we're looking at the bottom line. I know you'll talk to that in closing.
But I think parents need to understand that the diocese did not mandate what the parishes and the Catholic schools within the Oakland Diocese did. They left the decision to, in essence, local leadership. Ultimately, your decision, along with Father Paulson's consultation, is the decision that we follow.
Right. Excellent. You know, our faculty and staff is important, and their voice means a lot too. I've certainly conferred with parents who have called in, other principals during root meetings and principal meetings. When time's availed, not a lot of time, but I'm very open to researching national and local trends. I mean, I can tell you now that 34 states are burgeoning, 11 states seemingly more critical. You look at New Mexico, Rhode Island, Illinois. We're not in a second wave, we're going into a third wave of this very mercurial, complex disease. We've surveyed all along the stakeholders, our parents, our faculty and staff, even our students early on, to see how the learning was going. Last week we received our PPE materials from the diocese, but well in advance, we went out and through our GL and budget, we purchased everything. I call it Puro, but it's 70% alcohol. We have face masks when students forget their face masks. We'll talk more about that later. Today, green light status on confirming the 17 HEPA purifiers for all of our classrooms. Hoping to exercise Title IV funds there as well. We've been reviewing, I've met with senior leadership in the last 2 weeks in concert, our hybrid plan and schedule. I'm working with the staff to, really understand long-term routines and procedures. And, we have to modify our classrooms. We have to look at other spaces from a health safety guidelines standpoint. And something that's important to mention, March 14th, Friday, I was up very late at around 10:30 p.m. when our governmental agencies and governor made the decision with regards to the shutdown factor of COVID-19. I conferred with Father at 5:35 a.m. that morning, and we were the first school to put out a plan and a communication to push offshore and mobilize. We didn't know what this would become. We were one of the few schools that I know prior to Easter that used our professional development time to take our learning programs and portals like Google Classroom. At the time it was Dojo, now Seesaw for our K-3 folks. And we came out of Easter moving very quickly. Never missed a minute here in the summer. When Governor Newsom spoke this summer and made that decision to change from what we thought would be a hybrid plan, which was stealth, and you alluded to it, Joe, we went into a greater plan, namely our distance learning plan at 18 pages, very compressed with links and very salient. And I can assure you that I've gotten a lot of great communication from our faculty, staff, students, and parents that our distance learning plan is amazing. The concern for me is that social and emotional piece that we're going to talk to later. But there was a lot going on in that. We've had to review our master schedule. Again, when you have a school that is a school of excellence, and you're using every demographic footprint, exercising every curricular bend, things become impacted. And it's a very complex master schedule which we're fit to work with and be adaptive. Not only written, but Loom as well. It was really great, cathartically so, for me to write about something that's relevant to this week in a normalized fashion as a principal. I just want to end by saying that we've been leading agents, and we're going to continue to remain rational, calm, and objective, and make good decisions, because our mantra has never changed. Safety, health, and well-being, namely life. And that supersedes education, and yet that is very important to us.
So, Joe, I want to interject right here. In line with your conversation, there's a question out here. Do we have a site planning committee as outlined by the diocese? And if so, how often do you meet? Do you want to answer that?
Yes. We have what I've mentioned, a leadership team of faculty and staff, parents. We have an advisory council. So certainly we do have these councils that we reach out to and activate plans.
And also, on the financial side, I don't know if a day goes by that I don't hear from you via email or text message. So you consult a large number of groups and various stakeholders. Let me just take a moment to commend you and your faculty and staff. Distance learning is something we've gotten comfortable with now. Go back to March. We didn't have distance learning plans. There wasn't a uniform distance learning plan that the diocese or any district, school district had. So you did a great job basically acclimating to, like I said, an unprecedented pandemic. Let's shift gears here. I'm going to get to some of these other questions that people are sending in. But first, let's talk a little bit about the hybrid cohort plan that you and your faculty developed. So I understand there's going to be a red cohort, a gold cohort. We'll talk a little bit later about distance learning, but can you give us some details around in January? Our plan is to go to the hybrid cohort plan?
Certainly. So presently our schedule from a distance learning standpoint is synchronous and asynchronous. We've pulled out priority standards, we've compressed instructional minutes, and it's working very well for us. When we return on site, certainly the schedule is going to change. Rather than alternating Zoom classes with independent work for a full day, students will attend on-site half-day sessions and complete independent work for the remaining of the time period. So to answer your question succinctly, in the morning, we'll have the red group, and they'll be on campus from 7:45 a.m. to 11:40 a.m. And then at home, with independent learning from 12 to 3. And then the gold will be in the afternoon, and they'll be at home, independent learning from 8:30 to 11:30, and on campus from 11:50 to 3:40. You know, to be 6 feet apart with 18 students, we can achieve with 800 square feet in our classrooms. But that's why we have that structure, Joe.
And that's also a county mandate. You can't put 25 students in your classroom right now by county requirement. Let me ask you, because this is very important for families where both spouses work, especially if they both work outside the home. What are your plans for Club, our extended care program? Have you given that any thought?
I have. First off, at some point we need to hire our club director naturally upon returning, and his position may shift from a more supervisory role of morning drop-off and all kinds of other factors. But we're averaging, when we're here on site, 65 to 85 students for club.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic. And the reality is, with the way that cohorts are set up and really trying to mitigate the co-mingling and coalescing, if you will, and the migration patterns, and even recess being different and looking at PE different upon returning, I would say honestly, with integrity and transparency, that maybe it's focusing on the 10 to 12 students for our faculty and staff, so they can be on site if they choose to be. And unfortunately, I don't see that as a viable option with the OSHA standards and the mandates from the CDC, including our county health agencies at this point.
Okay, so you've set priorities, obviously, for the children of your faculty and staff. Will you look to see if there are possibilities to, in essence, accept additional students into your club program if it's allowed?
If it's allowed, certainly, always.
Okay, let me ask you. Okay, we talked briefly about the hybrid schedule. Tell me how the school day will be different in January. So this is not, if people feel that, as much as we'd love to go back to the pre-pandemic routine, we're not going to be able to do that in the near term. We're not going to be able to do that in January. How is the school day going to look different for our students and our faculty?
Well, it's going to be totally different. And I think in our heart of hearts, all of us want to return back to this wonderful community, and we will, but it'll be different. Morning assembly will take place in the classrooms with our new PA system, so not outside. Students will be dropped off directly, like a rainy day schedule, in front of their classrooms. Presently, our health task force and front office is working on a health screening. The faculty and staff do that daily to be on site. It may be, a Google form or an app, but we're going to have parents as primary educators do that initial screening at home. Certainly when they arrive to school, we'll have temperature checks. In fact, the first temperature gauges that we received, we beta tested them and we didn't feel they were appropriate. We went out and got the Lexus model, if you will, and so the assistants and teachers at the door, not for optics sake, but for health sake, will be chronicling that and keeping a repository as well of data. There certainly, as I alluded to earlier, will be limited movement with our students on campus to avoid the mixing of cohorts and following those mandates. Our students will have to wear masks. If they innocently do not bring their mask, we have them availed. Certainly 6 feet apart, a lot of frequent hand washing, new classroom procedures to follow. We can't share supplies and materials in class like we normally would. Certainly no close group work. Recess will be shorter. All activities, including PE, as I mentioned earlier, will require students to distance. So there's going to be a lot of thinking in that. No shared playground equipment. Truly only a maximum of half of the class will be in the room at one time, more self-contained. There will be no school assemblies, no field trips naturally, no faith family gatherings, or in-person masses. As you mentioned, Club CTK will not be open before and after school, perhaps only for our faculty. We'll dig into that more than we are presently. No choice lunch, no ice cream sales, no Thursday hot lunch will be available. And really, teachers are going to have to adjust their instructional activities and limit their lessons from the standpoint of movement throughout the classroom. And I want to dig into that more when we get into more of the live streaming aspects, so folks can be understanding from a practical standpoint as well. That was a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, but again, what it shows is some thought was put into developing these new processes and procedures by you and your leadership team, your faculty, your vice principals. There isn't a booklet that tells you how to reopen a K through 8 class. So again, it's difficult for people to understand how much has to go on behind the scenes so that you can reopen. And a lot of this is a book that's just being written live here in October. This is not something that you can get from the diocese, from the district, from the state. Let me again shift gears, and this is a difficult question to ask, but I'll ask it anyhow. Worst case scenario. How is CTK school prepared if a student or a staff member tests positive for COVID?
We're very prepared. I want to thank the diocese and their outside counsel for reaching out to the multi-agencies and creating internally a reporting documented procedure for confirmed or suspected cases of COVID-19. If a staff member or a student or a household member is diagnosed with or showing symptoms of the disease, even like a cough, a fever, shortness of breath, or has been exposed to someone, this certainly must be reported to us, and we would in good faith report it to the county health agency. We would keep a repository, of course, confer with the diocese as well. As I said, consult with Contra Costa County Health Services and determine really in consultation whether it necessitates moving one of our classes or closing one of our classes to a more remote learning platform. Certainly Cal OSHA pieces that I alluded to earlier here that we'd have to comply with from the county health department as well. If parents are in close contact, that's the thing. We're going to have a petri dish when we return. This is a compound structure that is very dynamic. I mean, we have college kids, not to stigmatize them, but coming home for Thanksgiving break. And so there's this reintroduction. We have 2 counties near us that are in the purple presently. No chicken little syndrome about it, but we have to be aware that with the inclement weather, things that I've cited, 2 newsletters removed, that when there's density with inclement weather inside and you have that aerosol sitting at the ceiling and then falling back down, this is a very, very complex matter, So again, it's just integrity, it's reporting, certainly making parents aware of cases too. You have to be careful. You have the Privacy Act of '74, you have HIPAA and FERPA laws, but the main thing is to remain calm, to be proactive, to report accordingly, to consult, to seek advice, to communicate well, to make decisive decisions, to make for sure that everyone's safe. And it's going to run the gamut. Also, the diocese has created a waiver that our faculty and staff has signed to return presently. In addition to that, when our parents return, they'll have a waiver as well. The ideal for me today, Joe, and I can go deeper, but we're going to put out an FAQ on Tuesday. So I'm going to have a 1 or 2 paragraph compressed communication going out as we do weekly.
That'll be on the school website.
You better believe it. And we've done that right at the beginning of COVID. We put out an FAQ that was prominent on our website for our families and for us all. At this iterative stage, we have a really robust one going out Tuesday. And on Tuesday, what I want to do is several things. I personally believe, as I stand here today, that coming back from Thanksgiving vacation on that Tuesday, December 1st, I'd like to put a survey out, are you in or out? And then
to the parents opt in to the
You better believe it. And then you sign that waiver accordingly if you're in. And here's the thing, we're not going to have eclectic means here. We have trimesters, and we're commencing with a new trimester, as I mentioned earlier. So at that time, if you're in for the whole trimester.
Okay, and that second trimester ends?
March.
Okay.
Right.
And you're going to issue the survey, say December 1. How long will families have to make their decision?
Well, I would like them to make their decision on the Monday prior to Christmas break. I would also like them, if they are returning, to sign the waiver accordingly. Okay. We have to go into master schedule planning, COVID planning. Now, if someone were ill, it's about equity and access for education naturally, and we've shown that we're going to help families. So it doesn't mean that it's an edict or a mandate. It just shows good intentionality, good leadership, good governance, and good structure under this unique time. I can go on, but I'm going to stop at that point.
One of the difficult things for all of us to get our hands around as far as the virus and the spread is we have a very large community here. The possibility that one family, a small number of families, might take a position contrary to their best, to the better judgment for the entire community as far as quarantining, wearing masks, etc. That puts the entire community at risk.
Right.
Joe, for example, you're not staffed to take all the questions about each of the 180 families, whether they are following the guidance of the county and other health officials. Would you look to see that families and students kind of they show self-discipline to do what's best for our community?
I would hope. And you're right on in the sense that, you know, we could have all the safety protocols here, but if code shifting wise on the weekends and with celebrations, actually living life, which I get, but that's when we're introducing new dynamics, interesting connectivity, and that's where this thing can really burgeon. It certainly has shown that in other states where schools have commenced early. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in my humble seat, I was remiss in not saying that I pray often and think often, but and that relationship is sacred with God and not pronounced. But you know, as you mentioned earlier, Joe, we have a lot of folks that are vulnerable. Presently, I have faculty members, students, grandparents. That's certainly something that we keep in mind, and so the responsibility of returning to school and making for sure that people are truly following those guidelines, I would earnestly hope that would be the case.
Okay. So Joe, we have roughly 20-25 minutes left. I want to jump ahead and make sure that we not only get to all of our questions, but also the questions that people are writing in. Let me ask you, next question. Our parents that are part of our audience, what can they do now to help prepare their children, our students, to return to school after the holidays?
Well, they can certainly ensure the fact that students need to wear masks and help us there, and be open to having them wear masks so they're comfortable for more elongated periods of time. They could certainly continue to help us with the social emotional effects of returning to school under these unique circumstances, establishing routines and showing the students that the routines will be dramatically different. And I know they're doing a great job of this, our parents, but emphasizing the importance of social distancing, good hygiene practices, following health and safety procedures at school, observing social distancing guidelines and CDC recommendations outside of school, and really trying to minimize that community spread. In fact, Joe, if I may, I want to dig into another factor here that aligns, and that's the safety procedures that we're putting in place for our students and families and our faculty. Mm-hmm. Everyone will be required to wear a mask here on site. Teachers will be wearing masks, but with our little guys and even big guys, if they want to put on a face shield, which we have, they can. Everyone on campus must refrain from shaking hands. All the normal tendencies, close proximal contact, what have you, whether by sports or by human nature. Certainly frequent hand washing. There'll be hand sanitizers located everywhere and implemented with procedures in each classroom. No water fountains will be available. Students will have to bring in their hydro flasks and water bottles. As I said, all classrooms will be equipped with HEPA purifiers. Yet this summer I met with Matrix HD, our air conditioning and heating unit folks, where there's a secondary measure that really is primary too, that already has filters and cleaning agents too. So again, it's a double measure with the HEPA piece. Bathrooms will have to be monitored for ensuring distancing and sanitizing. Teachers and assistants will have to walk students to those locations with cohort schedules. High touch points in the classrooms will have to be sanitized. I would say our assistants with gloves on would be flipping classrooms with cohorts coming in. We're going to take our custodial company and hire a 2-hour porter to hit high touch points, but also to flip those restrooms and dig in on that aspect as well. And certainly there will be no classroom visitors or volunteers.
Okay, let's touch on another very important subject. Let's talk about virtual learning and the option that some parents might choose during the December 1st survey. How will the virtual learning option be provided for students once the campus is reopened? So can you explain, in essence, if a family or a student opts out of in-class learning with the hybrid methodology, what can they expect?
Excellent. And before we begin that question, our survey most recently accounted for 1/3 of the folks deciding 3 weeks ago to do specifically that. That could change. It's very flexible. Well, and you can mention this on the financial side later, Joe, but with our bandwidth and all of the things that we've committed to our Promethean boards and so forth, live streaming is an option. So we're certainly looking at live streaming as an option. Zoom, we have the capability of, teacher being more stationary, and certainly being at home, and I'll talk about that more later, is not the most ideal. But again, live streaming, the Zoom option, there's Castify as an example that is more Chrome related, probably more conducive for middle school and high school, where a teacher could set up sort of an asynchronous lesson. I'm not mandating that for our teachers, but I would say live streaming, looking at the Zoom potentiality there. I want to get to a conjunction not, and I want to read it. The live stream option will not be the same as the current remote learning plan. Students are going to be watching a teacher deliver instruction to the students who are present in the classroom. And then due to limitations of technology, the teacher will not be able to interact regularly with the students who are learning remotely. And yet those students are very important to us.
Sure.
Yeah, just want to be clear with that.
Yeah, and it's very important for parents to realize that teachers in the classroom are going to split their time between two cohorts. There's no third option. If we were to, and in the finance section, I'll talk about the cost of hiring additional staff. School districts might have the opportunity to hire additional staff. As we've talked, if you're looking for additional teaching staff right now, you're not going to get, as I like to tell people, first round draft picks. Most people that are very good at their craft have jobs right now. Mm-hmm. So the decision around the staffing and the cohorts is basically to split the classroom teacher's day in half.
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me ask another difficult question. Again, I hate to be pessimistic, but what factors might prevent either the reopening in January or once we do reopen somewhere after January to potentially close the school and force the closing of school?
Well, certainly if there's a countywide mandate to close schools based on increased COVID infection, that would prevent us from reopening. Outbreak, God forbid, of COVID here at our school or in the greater context of our community would force the school to close or necessitate that, one or more classes, as I mentioned earlier, would have to temporarily be bilocated to remote learning factors.
Sure. Now, Jill, we're down to our last 10 minutes. I wanted to quickly touch on the finances of the school to allay any fears.
Do you mind, Joe, if we cover the social emotional
Go
component?
ahead. Why don't you do that first, and then I'll
Yeah.
finance, and then we'll take some questions.
Certainly we'll take more questions, absolutely. In our newsletter this week, and I want to thank the diocese for this, we received 3 newsletters on the social emotional level site, SELs. I hope that you review them. Last year, we were leading agents in the spring and into the fall of putting links for social emotional development, which is very important. My heart breaks there. But we've got to remain positive. In the effort to engage our families remotely, we really have to look at resources that support the social emotional well-being of our school. This week and last week too, I've reached out to one of our counselors who has worked with a few middle school families. She's outstanding. I've asked if she could do a few Loom videos that would be helpful. I actually asked her politely via voicemail if I could interview her as well. But you know what? We've got the Halloween parade coming up this Friday, and that's going to build community. We have the Feast of Christ the King. I want to thank Father Paulson for really reaching out on that behalf. It was actually in our WCEA WASC annual report. And so this year, aside from Catholic Schools Week, aside from Spirit Week, in November, amidst this very busy time, we have an ad hoc committee that's going to have a Spirit Week for Christ as our King, culminating into a Mass. The Executive Council, by the way, you kids have knocked it out of the park with your videos. You're so creative. Maybe one day we all wear crosses, all different sizes, to show our unity and love for Christ, all these blessings that occur here. But that builds the social emotional awareness. And right now we have an ad hoc committee for our Christmas program where most schools are closing that. And we recognize that we can't be on site. We're looking at very unique ways, editing and beyond, and creatively to produce that. We actually talked about faith families here recently and doing a better job with trying to activate those with a distant learning standpoint as well.
Joe, let me quickly cover the state of the school finances. All of you have heard me before or seen presentations on Christ the King's financial performance, the school's performance. We have a balanced budget. We continue to be in good shape to meeting that budget. And what's difficult is obviously we're going to have reduced fundraising during a pandemic year. Joe was able to make some operating cost cuts that allowed us to balance the budget without us having to raise the tuition more than 2.7%. There are some local schools, Catholic schools, that raise their tuition 8 or 9%. We also have decided to minimize our capital improvement. In the last 2 years, since Joe took over as the principal here, we've spent nearly $500,000 on capital improvements, roofs and things like that. But probably what I'm most proud of that Joe and his planning staff followed through on is 2 years ago we put in fiber optics to speed up the bandwidth and the computer performance in our classroom. I never dreamed that that would become a critical need for distance learning. I don't think any of us could. I think the Christ the King community needs to be commended for their support of the school, both with fundraising, paying the tuition. Costs don't go down. Teachers get paid whether it's distance learning or in class. Your utilities, all of those operating expenses, there's really not much of a difference. What I can tell you is we're in a position so that we could afford some of the protection equipment that we need to make sure that we have a safe environment. So I'll stop there on the finance side. And Joe, there's a few questions. Some I think I'm going to just answer right away. I think you've covered a lot of this. There was a question around how often does your site committee meet?
Oh my goodness.
You know, in your newsletter,
Right.
please invite parents. If parents want to come to my finance committee meeting, please be there.
Well, let me kind of dig
Go
into
ahead.
that question. We have a safety committee that has met monthly since the inception of me arriving, even pre-COVID, and the amount of things that have been accomplished there are unparalleled. We have a senior leadership team that meets daily. I was 4 hours in yesterday with them, 1 hour in earlier in the week. Again, our health task force, I've met with folks individually, met with them collectively too. We have an advisory council where we're meeting monthly as opposed to meeting quarterly. We have a parent-teacher guild. I have folks like you, Joe, Father Paulson. The list goes on and on and on. You just don't throw up fairy dust and unpack an REI tent to create the plans that we've created that have held utility well beyond these walls to other dioceses. Word's gotten back with not a lot of hard work, a lot of consultation, a lot of intentionality, a lot of measuredness and resolve and consultation. Nothing's done unilaterally. My definition of leadership is empowering others to become leaders. Thus, there's a shared leadership aspect. When I leave Christ the King with God's grace and health in 14 years to the ranch and back home with my family, I'm already cultivating leadership stewardship-wise for that transition. So I can assure you, we have all the bells and whistles at this school, as you alluded to blossom out, to grow developmentally. So not only, even professionally, development-wise, with the freckles.
Sure.
And the list goes on. That's a passion of mine.
And there are a number of committees that meet. Is there a special...
Our finance committee meet
Yeah.
often.
There isn't a special overarching, we just meet on the pandemic issue.
And you can't create plans if you're not meeting, and naturally we've shown that.
Okay, one of the questions was around, would outdoor instruction be considered? Let me just answer. If winter didn't come along, sure, it would be considered, but of course, it was 44 degrees this morning.
Well, we were purple, then red, now orange, so
Yeah, and it'll be cold until...
that fluctuates that understanding, right?
Let me see, some people are asking questions that we've addressed about live streaming and remote learning. So they're asking, what happens if the county tier color changed? Can we count on January 13th?
I'm hoping we can count on January 13th. I'll be honest, in consultation with a small group on Zoom with the possibility of unpacking like our younger kids, maybe opening up to like a K or a 1, I would think that if we keep that 13th date, which I'm not going to go back over what I've cited for good rationale and consensus decision making, maybe we bring our babies K1s back a week prior. I mean, we're already doing half days for the regular commencement of a school year, and I want to indoctrinate them, their families. Again, we would be orienting to families, working with teachers, really doing a really great job, I would hope and pray, to hit the ground running correctly. My biggest dream would be that we're in a tiered status where we can go K-8 with our cohort model and the hybrid model for the duration of the year. As I prayed with the students upon leaving when we had a donor from the diocese give us our medallions, my prayer was simple: Lord, protect this community. May everyone come back safely, and may we persevere and remind ourselves not only the blessings, but what is truly important. For me personally, this whole pandemic has brought me back to my roots, to God, to priorities, what truly matters. And yet we've been, this is a key point, data drives instruction. These surveys have driven, and this is important, adaptive change. And we've proven and shown that.
Yeah. So Joe...
And we don't want to pivot too quickly, by the way.
Yeah.
And yet we're fit for that.
Joe, we have one more minute, and let me just answer or respond. One person wanted to know, do you reach out to other Catholic schools and consult on these matters? Yes.
Yes, they actually consult with me. How's that?
Exactly. You're the local root expert. The other question I think is an important one. Can parents volunteer to help your effort to reopen the school? Can they give you a call or your vice principals a call?
Well, they have. I've probably responded to countless emails, phone calls. I'll drop everything. I won't go down a squirrel hole because, again, the respect
Sure.
and the non-inflammation and sensationalization. For me, by the way, since starting at St. Raymond's, parents and students have always been respectful to me.
Sure.
Ergo, the fact that I want to be respectful to them. If you're Facebooking underground and you're coagulating that way, and you can't come in and speak to me face to face, then that's where, I'm not going to go down from a squirrel hole of energy into a snake hole. I have a responsibility to lead this school humbly, and I'm fit for it. I've done it well over 3 decades. But the parents, and I'm going to end on a positive here, have led this discussion by conversations, by meetings, by emails, by surveys, by example. What parish has weekly these types of interviews? Father and I have been in the church many of times. We're transparent, open leaders with great intentions of the heart. And when it comes to God's children and future children, it becomes a stewardship matter, a matter of mission, a matter of ministry. I don't come to work, I come to school. This is not a job, it's a vocation. And so I can go on philosophically there, but parents have influenced our decision making. Right. Look at PTG, look at advisory council, look at the ability to read, whether by Loom, listening auditory-wise, or reading. We've been effective communicators who are open to active listening. I'll silence my heart for anyone. That's the ministry side of Joe Silvera amidst the human frailties. But it's got to be respectful. It's got to inform adaptive change, and it has to be something that is full fulcrum. And we've not displaced anyone. Our students, our parents, love them. They're awesome. Our faculty and staff, amazing. Our parish, that's very unified with Father Paulson leading. All of the councils and agencies, cited earlier, we're doing nothing in a siloed effect, nothing unilaterally. We're doing things responsibly, with resolve, with measuredness, and objectivity. If we really step back and truly understand what's important at this time, we would all agree to a January 13th date. Further, we pray that we're in a status where we can move forward with that date.
Joe, on behalf of the Christ the King community, I'd like to thank both you and Father Paulson for your commitment to Catholic school education, to the Catholic Church, for your time tonight. Thank you for being so open and candid with what obviously was a difficult decision. Thank you. I wish you and the entire Christ the King community nothing but success, even in these very difficult times. We will get through this. There will be a day that the pandemic is in our rearview mirror, and I look forward to that day. But you and Father Paulson have gotten us through the first months of the pandemic, and all of us really respect and appreciate all the work that the two of you have done. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Well, we pray. I want to thank you for your commitment to Christ the King School, not only our finance council, but the day-to-day consultation as well. Father Paulson and I will tell you this. We're in community, and that's what Christ calls us to be. So for our fulfillment comes when we are all together. I have immense respect for our parents, for their sacrifice. They have been our teachers at home. They've been heavy lifting. They sacrifice for the commitment of this education, tuition-wise and beyond, so Catholic education is viable. I want to thank Father Paulson for his leadership and his years and years of service at top-flight parishes and schools, with a man who has a doctoral degree in education, to truly understand what's going on. And so this evening has been a pleasure for me. As you can see, not only we pray thoughtful with my thinking, but most importantly, passionate.
Well, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Again, thank you for making the time to hear all this very important information around the reopening of Christ the King School. I hope this has helped. If there are additional questions, reach out to any of us involved, and we'll get you answers. Thanks again.
God bless you all. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Father Paulson.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this interview series, and we will be meeting next Thursday for our next conversation. I know there are more questions out here, and I'm sure Joe, your principal, will have a look at Facebook and glance through these questions, and he will respond to you. But I just want to say our school leader is patient, loving, understanding, and hardworking. More than anything else, is led by his faith. And so thanks again and have a wonderful evening. God bless.